The following program is made possible by supporters and friends of Biblical Foundations Academy International.
Hi, my name is Keith Johnson, and I'm what you might call, well, some people might call, a recovering United Methodist pastor. The reason I say recovering is that I've been in a process over the last 10 years of learning and relearning information that's actually changed my life. It all started in 2001 as I took my family to the Pikes Peak in Colorado, and as I was on the top of this beautiful mountain, 14,000 feet above sea level, I looked around and I saw God's creation, and I prayed this prayer that I'd never heard before and haven't heard since. And I simply looked up and I said, Father, teach me to love what you love. And I tell people I maybe should have stopped there, but then I continued and I said, and Father, teach me to hate what you hate. And it was as if he heard my prayer at that very moment, raised his hands and began to conduct a beautiful symphony in my life. After about 9 months, I had a dream. And I know it's sometimes hard for people to accept this, but this dream was really vivid. And in the dream, there was a scroll flying over my head. And I heard a lady's voice saying, if you can tell me where the scroll will open up, you win $1 million. I said, Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 3. The scroll came down, it opened up to that very spot. 2 things happened after that. I woke up and realized I hadn't won the million. But the second thing was more important, and it actually changed my life. I heard a voice that said this, I've not changed my appointment with you to be in my city at the time of Shavuot. Now, being a Methodist, I really knew what that meant. It meant Pentecost. You know, the place where the church actually was born. After I realized this wasn't a matter of just bad pizza, but this was a legitimate invitation, I took that invitation and prepared for a trip to Jerusalem. While I was there, I encountered 3 important things. I call them the 3 T's. God's time, God's Torah, and God's Tetragrammaton, his 4-letter name, which I talk a lot about. For the last few years, I've been teaching about the Tetragrammaton, his name, and I've been teaching about Torah. But up until now, I haven't spent a lot of time addressing time. Well, the time has come. I have to say, as a Methodist, I feel pretty confident about this topic about time. You know, the issue with the Tetragrammaton, the name of God, boy, I spent, so much time on it and books and DVDs and all of that. I mean, it's been an amazing process. I'm excited about what we've come up with. And Torah is a constant and a continual process for me. I get a chance to teach that all the time. But when it comes to time, you know, we have something in the Methodist tradition called sacred time. It really is quite simple. We take the life of Jesus, and then there are significant events in his life that we base our time on. So, for example, we start at Advent around the time before Christmas, and then from Christmas, we go into the whole issue of when he was named, and then from there, we go into Lent, and then from there, it's Easter, and then Pentecost, all the way back into Advent. I'm telling you, it's really quite simple. So for me, this should be a bit easier than the other 2, but I think it will be a bit exciting. Now, I've got to slow down here because there are 2 very important concepts you need to understand regarding Methodist sacred time. First of all, we're dealing with what I call the 2 most important celebrations throughout the year. The calendar really is based on 2 important celebrations. One is Christmas, and the second one is Easter. Now, the second thing that's important is understanding the dates. Christmas is a fixed date, December 25th. Unless you're Greek Orthodox, they make it January 7th. I'll talk to you about that later. But December 25th is a set date. The second is a little bit more complicated. It's the date for Easter. Now, according to Methodist sacred time, here is what we say. According to the United Methodist understanding of sacred time, Easter is the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. Now, I'm sure some of you are probably wondering, now, where do you all get this? Well, you know, being Methodist, there's a method for everything. And we basically took the Bible and were able to come up with this formula. So I'll give you an example where we got this. I think it's in Genesis. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's in Exodus. Wait a minute. It might be Leviticus. It might, just a second. It's not the Psalms. It's in here. I'm sure it's in here somewhere. Maybe in the New Testament. The thing about this is important. It's important for me as a Methodist to know that if I have got sacred time that's based on a formula, it's got to be a biblical formula. I mean, the Biblical Foundations Academy is based on people having biblical information. And here I am as a Methodist, and I'm a little bit frustrated because I can't, off the top of my head, figure this out. But just wait a minute. Time out. It's possible that my Methodist tradition isn't actually in line with the biblical truth that I've found. So I'm going to need to do something. It's got to be that the times that we call sacred time have to match the times that are in the scriptures. If not, then I just like to say something real simple. It's a little word that I use. It's just, uh-oh.
I don't know what to say, folks. Keith is just gone. He said it before he left that he needs to do more research. So
In order to conduct the necessary research on time, I knew what I had to do and where I had to go. We found a quiet apartment within a few miles of the old city of Jerusalem that even had underground parking, which seemed to be a picture of the depth of discovery that waited. Every time I parked that car in the dark cavern underneath the apartment and took the elevator up to the third floor, I would get a sense of the process of the daily discoveries that were coming. After settling into my new surroundings, it was time for some good old-fashioned reflection. I needed to stop and look at the ever-changing sky that kept my eyes fixed toward the heavens, while at the same time my mind was telling my body to get ready to get moving on the earth. I wanted to be led to people, places, and things that would help me effectively research this important topic of study on God's clock. I prayed one of my favorite verses for times like these, Isaiah 30:21, whether you look to the left or to the right, may you hear the voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk ye in it." Or in my case, this is the way, walk, run, ride, fly, or drive ye in it. Either way, it was time to get moving. I needed to see what I call headquarters for God's clock. To watch the clouds move over the old city of Jerusalem was mesmerizing. I kept thinking about the many people who are hindered by the clouds of tradition that keep them from seeing the truth. Many of those same people are content to stay in the realm of religion rather than encounter the God who desires a relationship with his people through his word. I witnessed a rare Jerusalem snowfall mixed with freezing rain. I was reminded of the promise of his purpose-filled word. Isaiah 55:10-11, for as the rain and the snow come down from heaven, and do not return there without watering the earth, and making it bear and sprout, and furnishing seed to the sower, and bread to the eater, so will my word be which goes forth from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, without accomplishing what I desire, and without succeeding in the matter for which I sent it. As children rushed outside to build their temporary snowmen, I thought about those people who build their own image of God, not realizing that when the warm light of accountability shines, their convenient creation will also melt away. After the clouds moved out, I could finally see a clear view of Jerusalem. However, my eyes were constantly being drawn away from the Golden Dome to something I had never noticed before. It looked from my perspective to be a clock tower. I had an urge to get there. Well, I apologize for leaving the studio so abruptly, but I knew there was no way I could do justice to this important topic of time behind the walls of a studio. I needed to do something radical. Get myself an airplane ticket, leave my hometown of Charlotte, North Carolina, and get myself back to the land of Israel. That's exactly what I've done. I've come to this spot for a very important reason. You know, it's drawn me. If you notice behind me, there's a huge, very tall clock tower. And if you look at this particular clock tower on most sides of Jerusalem, you can see it because it's at the highest point, just about the highest point of what would be considered the old city of Jerusalem. What's interesting to me is how this particular clock represents in many ways why sacred time, according to the Methodists, doesn't connect with God's time according to the Bible. So I'm here right now, the clock tower is behind me, the minaret is just beside it. In the middle we've got the upper room, or the place where they call the Last Supper, and in the basement of this spot is the traditional spot for the tomb of King David. We've got all three religions coming together in one spot. So what I'm going to try to do is this. I want to help you understand the importance of time from three perspectives. God's clock according to the Muslim faith, God's clock according to the Christian faith, and God's clock according to the Jewish faith. But in the end, I'm hoping that you will be inspired to understand God's clock from the biblical perspective. Let's go get the information. Let's get the inspiration, and hopefully you're going to experience the revelation on rediscovering God's clock from the land of Israel and maybe even beyond.
Before I could consider moving on, I needed to do an assessment of where I was standing. I knew the clock tower is a part of Dormition Basilica on the southwest perimeter of the old city of Jerusalem, outside what is called in Hebrew Sha'ar Zion, the Zion Gate. Just a stone's throw away from the clock tower is a Muslim minaret representing what is called in the Arabic language Nabi Dawid, the prophet David. The Muslim religious symbol is found all over the Middle East, but what was it doing here? On the ground floor, we find the traditional spot of the tomb of King David, where today Jewish men and women come to pray. Just above this room, we find a set of stairs that lead up to the traditional spot for the Lord's Supper and the quote-unquote upper room, where you can still see the minaret just above this spot. Christians from around the world wait with great anticipation to enter the small door so they can find a spot to sing or pray in the traditional Christian holy site. Most Christians actually believe this to be the actual spot of the Lord's Supper or the upper room, not realizing that there's no evidence of the same. But that is another story, which we're going to get to. After a quick overview of my surroundings, I still had questions about the Dormition Basilica, or what I fondly call the clock church, that was providing a womb of protection and growth for all of this traditional activity. It didn't take long to discover that there was good reason to take a closer look. After conducting some quick research about this place, two dates caught my attention. Because it was extremely difficult for foreigners to acquire land, and because the building with David's tomb had been a Muslim holy site, it took long negotiations between the Muslim Sultan and the German Emperor Wilhelm II to acquire the land. During his famous trip to the Orient, the emperor inaugurated the Protestant Church of the Redeemer on the morning of October 31st, 1898, Halloween. And in the afternoon, he took possession of the land on which the future church would be built. For him, this was an act of personal religiosity. He wanted to be emperor of all Germans, of the Protestants as well as the Catholics. Since Emperor Wilhelm personally owned the land, he reserved the right to have say on many matters. On March 21st, 1906, on the day of the, here it comes, vernal equinox, he sent the first Benedictine monks to serve as priests of the new church. Anytime I see or hear the two words vernal equinox, you have my attention. It was time to go in and see for myself what this church was all about. I started at the front door, coming across words in a mosaic saying, Benedicat Dominus ex Sion, the Lord bless you from Zion, Psalm 128:5. From there, my eyes focused on the huge circle in the floor of the sanctuary. Was this the connection between the vernal equinox and the monks' arrival? After reeling from what I found on the floor of the sanctuary, I went to see if I could find a monk to ask some questions. When I returned to the sanctuary, they were busy leading services. After listening to a short song, I found two of my favorite things: an open door and stairs leading either up or down. In this case, I was on my way down. It was a bit eerie when I reached the bottom. I have to admit I am still a bit uncomfortable being around candles and crypts, but I figured it was a necessary process of discovery. I had reached the foundation of this church, and it was built on the prominence of Mary. In fact, the official name of what I call the Clock Church is the Basilica Dormitio Beatae Maria Virginis of the Sanctuary of the Falling Asleep in Death of Mary, the Mother of God. Because of the strength of this tradition about Mary, it was historically called Mater Omnium Ecclesiarum, or in English, Mother of all churches. We'll have to come back later in our project to see how the Mother of the Church deals with the clock created by the Father of all creation. As I made my way back toward the section of the compound where our clock tower stood, I was stopped in my tracks when I saw this man. It looked like this was his spot in the building, and he could be an ideal person to help me with our project. The question was if he'd be willing to talk to me. I found someone I believe that can give me some answers. Rabbi Mordechai Goldstein, who's sitting here in this building that's been drawing me for the last month. I'm going to ask him some questions. He's going to answer us. We're going to try to help you understand. Rabbi, tell us about this building as loud as you can.
I am the rabbi of Mount Zion for the past 45 years. And the building is very interesting. It's only one place in the world where all three religions come together.
You're kidding me.
You have King David, Jewish. You have the Last Supper room. And you have on top a Muslim minaret. Now, basically, Jerusalem is holy to God.
Yes.
It's given to God and said, this is my place.
Okay.
God gives us a place in a physical place,
Yes.
which was the temple, which is Jerusalem, and there's a spiritual place, which is Saturday, the Sabbath.
The Sabbath.
Which means his Shekhinah, his presence is there. So the presence is in Jerusalem.
As I continued to dialogue with Rabbi Mordechai, he gave me many insights into the Jewish perspective of God's clock. He encouraged me to continue this journey by celebrating the Sabbath, which is determined by God's clock. He also wanted to send me on my way with a special blessing.
It says, from Zion comes forth the Torah. Zion is the center, goes out to the world. So I put my hands out and give you the blessings from the power that's in me to give the blessing to the people. I got that power. We got it from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God gave it from Melchizedek. He gave it to Abraham, and he passed it on to us. So I'm giving you that. I'm the rabbi in the mountain here, giving the blessing, the holy blessing from the Bible that's there. I'm going to give here, our friends here, kids, that you should have the blessing in order to help other people to come close to see the greatness of the Almighty and praise Him. Hallelujah! Hallelujah! And sing the songs of David.
Even though I was inspired by the rabbi to enjoy Shabbat, I had more work to do before I could rest. I realized that most of what I was about to do would require some real digging up of hidden history. It feels like flying through time when the research shovel hits one of those hidden ancient gems. It has been exhilarating to find where ancient history meets present reality. I met a man 10 years ago in Israel who really helped me understand the importance of this connection. I wanted to see if he would be willing to help me again. There he was, Ronnie the antiquities dealer. Can I come in?
Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you, my friend. I love spending time in his shop looking at artifacts that span thousands of years. However, today was not a show and tell visit. I needed some perspective, and Ronnie was just the guy who could give it to me.
For about 50 years, I was interested in archaeology. Mainly artifacts, not buildings, not houses, nothing.
I hesitated to do it, but I needed to know what Ronnie knew about time.
The right thing is to understand the ancient world is to understand the world today. What is time today? Time can be minutes, hours, days, months, years, and we even can't agree on these simple things. We have a problem. There are Muslim people and they have their year. There are Christian people and they have their year. There are Jewish people and they have their year. and nobody can agree one to each other about the simple thing of which is called time, which one of the most dominating things in our life. When does the day begin? The evening before the night and the evening before the day is from the day that will come? No, not sensible. So is it from the day that passed? Not sensible. So the general calendar couldn't decide on it, and when it can't decide, it begins at midnight. It's a very interesting way, you know. You have two people, one says left, one says right, so what do? I go straight, not to offend anyone. So a simple thing like deciding when a day begins, some places it begins a night and a day after, some places there's a day and a night after, and for the people that can't decide, they begin the day in the middle of the night. Very, very interesting.
Ronnie had a whole lot more to say than I had time to hear at that moment. However, I knew he was the natural choice to be my quote-unquote time advisor for this project. Ronnie, thank you so absolutely.
Pleased to entertain you.
Rather than say goodbye, I simply said lahitrot, which in Hebrew means see you. I knew I would need him sooner rather than later. Before experiencing God's clock on Shabbat, I took a drive out to the Judean desert, not far from Jerusalem. There's a beautiful place called the Oasis of Jerusalem that is down in a peaceful valley between the Judean hills. There's a creek that winds through the floor of the valley, with small waterfalls along the way. I must admit, as beautiful as it was, I didn't come here for the scenery, but rather for its symbolic significance. Two biblical prophets, Elijah and Jeremiah, used to come and spend time in these caves for the purpose of refuge, restoration, refreshment, and revelation. These rugged walls of rock protected them from the winds of persecution and adversity while waiting for instruction from the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. Just as they drank from the spring in times of thirst, I needed the waters of truth to refresh me while I journeyed through the hot desert of tradition. I wanted to feel the presence of the Spirit of God during this project, and I want you to sense the same thing. May it be. Come, Holy Spirit, and teach us about God's clock. Now I was finally ready to follow the advice of my new friend Rabbi Mordechai to enter into the blessing of Sabbath. And Lord knows I needed one. A quick check of the newspaper reminded me that I wasn't in the United States anymore. Right on the front page, there was an opportunity to apply some of the information about God's clock. I remembered when I was approaching Jerusalem, there was a digital clock right at the entrance to the city for all to see. This clock was placed here to let everyone know when Shabbat was going to start. I knew what I wanted to do to prepare for Shabbat. The problem was it seemed that there were a whole lot of other folks that had the same idea. In fact, it felt like the whole city was on the same schedule, ready for some frenzied fun on Friday afternoon at the market called the Shuk.
All I'm trying to do is get something to eat for Sabbath. Look at all these people. What am I going to do? I'm at the Shuk with my friends. This guy right here, if you can take a picture of that fish right there, that guy right there, he is coming home with us for Shabbat. I'm ready for Shabbat.
After getting back to the apartment to settle down for the evening over a great meal courtesy of the best shuk in Israel, I thought about an entire city sitting down together over a meal to celebrate something that was based on God's command to follow his clock. as the sun was beginning to set over the city of Jerusalem, I thought about how amazing it is that even today we can look to the heavens and see what to do on earth based on God's amazing creation. Genesis 1:14 says, "Then God said, 'Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years.'" I thought about the little children who hear their parents recite Genesis 2:1-3 every Friday evening. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their hosts. By the seventh day, God completed his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all of his work which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. What a great idea God has. From sunset to sunset, I will take a rest before getting ready for the next leg of this journey of discovering God's clock. Join me in the next episode as we continue the process of discovery about God's clock from the Muslim perspective. Travel with me as we break through the borders to the Muslim-controlled Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the military zone surrounding the tomb of Abraham in Hebron, and the PLO-governed ancient city of Jericho. This is only a small sampling of the many people, places, and things I encounter as we delve deeper into the Time Will Tell series.